Okay. Kashwa Elep Inshnaknakwa. Today I'm going to be speaking about cultural plants through a two-eyed seeing approach. So to start off, I'd like to acknowledge the land of which I'm residing on, Cooksham Catlap, to the Coast Salish people for allowing me to live, learn, and work on their territory. I am a visitor to these lands, and I am very thankful to get to explore the land and plant relations here. I'd like everyone to take a second to figure out whose land you're currently residing on. I often utilize this website, nativeland.ca, and I'll check the territory of the land that I'm visiting. I think it's important for everyone to acknowledge that Indigenous peoples have been here for thousands of years, and you're likely living on some land that was stewarded by an Indigenous nation pre-contact. So, hello everyone. My name is Shayla Chalifoux, Muskosis Nitsikasin, Shakawash Mukhkan, Statlium Mukhkan, Treaty 6 Mukhkan. My Cree name is Muskosis, which means little bear. I come from Shakawash, a community part of the Statlium Nation, and I come from Treaty 6 territory, also known as Edmonton, Alberta. I am the founder of Shaylish Indigenous Plant Selections, a native plant consulting business servicing residential and commercial sectors. I have a Bachelor of Horticulture Science with a major in plant health. I will soon be done my Statlium language fluency diploma, and I am going to transfer to the degree program. The Statlium language is also called Statlium Hitch, and I've gained a lot of healing from learning one of my ancestral languages. My land ties, I am connected to Treaty 6 territory, which is the prairies of Alberta. That is where I grew up. I am part of the Shakawash community, which is also known as Cayuse Creek, and that is one of 11 communities that make up the Statlium Nation, which is the interior Salish nation within what is now called British Columbia. And I am also connected to Coast Salish territory. Both my parents are born in BC. My mom was born at Shakawash, and my dad was born in Vancouver. I've been visiting these lands since I was a child, and I finally made the move in 2018 to pursue a horticulture degree. The picture on the bottom left is taken on Liuwat Nation, and it's by a town called Pemberton and on a hike called Semaphores Lake Hike, and that is a glimpse of what some of Statlium territory looks like. So, what is a native, cultural, and invasive plant? Native plants are species that have co-evolved to a specific region and have therefore made symbiotic relationships with the species on that land. A cultural plant is a plant relation that has developed a strong connection with those who share the same tmícwa, the same land. And an invasive species is an introduced species that is not native to that ecosystem. They often don't have natural predators, and this makes it easier for them to spread and take over areas, and they smother out some native plants. All plant relations have a very strong connection to Indigenous peoples. Some of them provided construction materials. Some of them are malaman, which is medicine, or shaitlin, which is food. They could be part of our intakmin, our way of life. And then we have these new relations, new to us relations. So malaman plants are healers, they're doctors. Our shwanaem, our indigenous doctor, would be very trained in the use and application of our medicine plants. And one example of a important medicinal plant is shushgachtin, which is swamp tea, also known as Labrador tea. It is the picture on the top left, and one way you could identify Labrador tea is by the fuzzy orange bottoms of the leaves. It's an important plant characteristic because you don't want to be consuming there's another plant, bog laurel, I believe, that is not medicinal. And this brings up a good point that consuming any plants for medicine or food, you should be with a trained or experienced knowledge keeper, because there's risks to not identifying the right plant or consuming too much of a plant. Labrador tea is one that you do not want to consume too much of. I usually just take a few leaves and drop it into a tea, and it helps me with my anxiety. Some Sha'ichlin plant characteristics, they provide our nutrition. They're healthy. They are sustainably harvested. Indigenous peoples are not taking more than they need, and they're also considering generations to come. When you're harvesting food or medicines or any plants on the land, you want to ensure that you're doing it in a way to ensure harvest for next year. So harvesting is done in a very careful manner and in a reciprocal way. So we have community building. A lot of communities would go harvest out together. It's a way to teach the youth about our plant relations and how to respectfully interact with the land and takum and tmícwa, all our relations that are out there. One example of an important food crop is chakum, which is pictured on the bottom left, also known as Saskatoon berry or service berry. There was like 6 different varieties that were recognized in Statlium territory, and they were labeled as like tasty, no good, or drying. So people would know how to use that specific berry for whatever their needs were. Next, we have intakmin, which means a way of doing or a way of life. We have ceremonial plants that provide spiritual healing, and they're used in our traditions. An example of this is poontlip. Poontlip is Rocky Mountain juniper, and it is pictured on the top right. The berries are edible, and they're also used, the leaves are used in ceremony for smudging. And then we have our new to us relations. So I've heard some people speak about invasive species being a relation to learn. They provide an opportunity potentially their food or their medicine, they are still are more than human kin. There's still a plant relation. And one example of that is plantain. So Plantago lanceolata. This is considered an exotic species here in BC. There is still a Statlium hitch name for this plant, and I see that as this plant relation was introduced here, but Statlium people were still able to find a part or a place for this plant to have in their community, and it is known as a medicinal plant. So this is something I'm still grappling with. I see Himalayan blackberry that is taking over a lot of our land here on Coast Salish territory, and it's an aggressive invasive species here, and I'm just thinking how could we even start to eradicate it? It's so hard to control and remove. And after reading the book Medicine Wheel for the Planet by Dr. Jennifer Grenz, she speaks about how she's viewing Himalayan blackberry with a new set of eyes. And now I'm starting to look at it as, okay, it provides food. It provides berries for us, for our non-human kin. It provides food for our pollinators, foods for our birds, and then it also provides habitat. So yes, it's aggressive, but how can we steward the land which it is on? And it's teaching me that we do have to steward the land. And Indigenous people have been stewarding these lands. They didn't just leave the land alone and like hope that it would produce these mass amounts of foods and medicine. It was worked, and I realized that we have to put in some work to control these invasive species, but we can also learn from them and eat from them. Okay, so I wanted to speak about some native seed. There are all different types of seed out there. On the left is fireweed. You can see the fluff on it, that this seed was adapted to spread by wind. The wind takes the fluff and spreads its seed. In the middle, we have hooker's onion. You may be able to see the little black seeds that are in the dried seed heads. And these spread by likely dropping right below or by any birds coming to eat them and spread them that way. On the right, we have just a different kind of seeds to show. So the big berry at the top is organic juniper berries. I wouldn't plant these, although that could be a cool experiment to see if anything would grow from them. But I drop these in my tea or in my bath. And the left Ziploc bag is dried globigia seeds, and I was just crushing up the seed heads in the bag, grabbing a pinch of seeds and directly spreading them onto the area that I wanted them to grow, and that seemed to work great for these seeds. Other seeds and other suppliers, so there's raven song, satin flower, and starseed. These are all seed suppliers that are closest to me here near Vancouver area. And when you are purchasing native seeds, it is important to find native seeds that are local to your area. This will ensure a higher success rate when you're planting out your plants, because the plants where the seeds came from are already adapted to those conditions. It's also really important for restoration purposes. You want to be planting the appropriate ecotype. There is a challenge on finding native seeds and the right ecotype for the area you are restoring. So this is just something to consider about native seeds. Some propagation techniques with most plants that you can do depending on their plant structures. One of them is divisions. So these are good for plants that spread by rhizomes, these underground plant structures. Pictured is sweetgrass, and you can see that it was divided up here. Sweetgrass is really easy to divide. Another way to propagate is by seed. Pictured here is small-leaved lupine, and these seeds were sown in fall of 2024. Some of them had germinated in like January. There was leaves, and then we had a cold snap in February, and I was worried that they may be affected by our frost that was incoming. So any of the trays that had newly germinated seeds, I had pushed together to put them pot tight or tray tight, and then also covered them with some row cover or remake cloth. It's a cloth that is white and it allows water and sun to still get through to the plants. When you're growing seeds on a larger scale, it is harder to do. So one thing I was taught is that I could have started, so small-leaved lupine is an annual native plant here. I could have started the seeds after that cold snap, which generally comes around February here. And then they wouldn't have to be exposed to those negative temperatures. So important to consider the climate you're living in, the weather you're going to get. Are these plants frost sensitive? And a lot of the native plants here prefer a cold snap. When they're in the seed form, they require a cold stratification. So a lot of seeds I just planted in the fall. They're left outside in the trays, and then they get that cold stratification, that cold treatment that helps break the seed dormancy. And then when warmer temperatures hit, the seeds will germinate. Some seeds require a warm stratification, so they require warm and moist periods. Other seeds may benefit from an acid bath, and that is scarification. So you're breaking the seed coat. So whatever seeds you are planning to start, it's important to do some research on them and figure out how best to help those seeds germinate. We are doing it a little bit differently of how they would germinate in the wild. So out in nature, there's birds that are eating seeds, pooping them out. There's also bears that eat a lot of berry seeds, travel and poop those out. So how could we mimic those conditions that the plants go through? Another way to propagate plants is through cuttings. So pictured here are some hardwood cuttings. We have salmonberry that is starting to leaf out. And then the green stems are vine maple, which I'm not expecting anything to happen. My research about vine maple was stating that softwood cuttings are best to take, and that would be done in June. Softwood cuttings are um, a different growth of hardwood cuttings, and they're taken at different times. So it's important to do some research into whatever plant you're trying to propagate and what best cutting to do. So salmonberry is really easy to grow from hardwood cuttings. Hardwood cuttings are taken when the plant is dormant, so this is usually winter time. You can use some rooting hormones on your hardwood cuttings. I didn't with these because I didn't have any, although salmonberry usually readily grows from cuttings. It's one of the easier ones to grow. I would have liked to add rooting hormone to the vine maple just to see if it would help them. I'm not expecting anything, but I'm doing some trials, and that's what I'd recommend to everyone is just try it out, take notes, see what works in the area and see what doesn't. Important for cuttings is the growing medium. So you want something that will keep the base of the cuttings from drying out, but you don't want them sitting in water. So this mixture is peat moss, perlite, and there's a little bit of sea soil, which is like a composty type soil that I just had on hand here. So now I want to get into some important plants and share a little bit about them. We have poonslip, Rocky Mountain juniper. This is Malaman, Shaitlin, and Takman. In the Lilwa Botanical Resources book, I read that they have edible berries. You can eat them fresh or dried, and they were often used as flavoring because they have a strong flavor to them. I haven't tried them yet, but I'm excited to once I go back to my territory. They are antibacterial, anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial. They have aromatics to them and are a tonic. If you're trying to grow poonslip, they would prefer well-draining soil with full sun. They flower in spring and fruit in fall. Berries are gathered after usually in fall, and I've read that they taste better after a cold snap. If you want to propagate poonslip, you can do hardwood cuttings, which are taken in the winter. And my research brought up that they may prefer bottom heating to help with rooting of that cutting, and also seeds, which are sown in the fall because they prefer that natural cold stratification that they will get when being planted outside. And a caution about Rocky Mountain juniper or any junipers that you are consuming is if you have any kidney issues or differences, don't consume juniper. So we have camas. This is a Shaylish plant. It is an important cultural plant. They have edible bulbs, and pictured there is a mature camas bulb that I got to see at the Gary Oak Ecosystem Conference held on Vancouver Island. They are a trade item. They were a trade item to some Indigenous communities, and I was learning from my Statlium Hedge classmate, Archie Manuel, that our people in Statlium territory would travel down to Washington to harvest camas and bring them back up. So despite them not growing naturally on Statlium territory, they still found their way there. And I find that so cool because I've been drawn to this plant since I first learned about it. This is my first native plant love once I found out they were an edible crop, I just realized there's so much to learn about our native plant relations. So if you want to grow common camas, they would prefer well-draining soil that is seasonally wet. They like full sun, they can handle some part shade, and these plants bloom around springtime. Here on Coast Salish territory, May is about a time that they bloom, and then they'll die back and go dormant for the summer. So it's important to not overly water them during this time as they are sleeping, and they're adapted to our dry summers here and can survive those conditions. So to propagate them, you can do this by seed or by bulb divisions. I started a bunch of camas seeds in fall. They like that cold stratification. And as camas grows, the bulbs will create smaller bulbs, bulblets beside them, and you can harvest those little bulblets and plant them somewhere else, or give them to your neighbors, or eat them. And an important thing about camas and the ecosystems that they're part of is the Garryoak ecosystem, which is on Vancouver Island. So there's a bunch of Garry oaks and there's beautiful camas fields underneath it. It is truly spectacular. And after going to the Garryoak Ecosystem Conference and reading Dr. Jennifer Grenz's book, I learned that this land, it's not like a natural wonder. It was land that was stewarded for thousands of years by Indigenous communities to continue to produce a lot of camas bulbs. There was burning that took place, and the fires would help keep at bay snowberry, which can spread like crazy. It's another one of our native plants, but this land was stewarded, and it is it's one example of Indigenous agriculture, but it's a food system. So now when I go to a camas field, I think about what the Indigenous people were doing back in the day to maintain that food source for their communities, and harvesting was a way to maintain that land and ensure that more bulbs had room to grow. And yeah, so a little about camas. Quilaupa is nodding onion, another beautiful blooming crop. It is a food crop, and they're spicy. They're spicy, like oniony taste. So they were used for seasoning. The bulbs and the leaves that kind of look like chives are edible. I was just reading that Quilaupa can be used like an insect repellent when it's rubbed on your skin. I haven't tried it, but I will be trying this summer. They like full sun, can withstand some shade, and they like well-draining and rocky soils. You can propagate these by divisions, and they would actually prefer some divisions around every 3 years because they do spread. They'll spread by growing more bulbs, just like the camas. So if you got it, take some clumps out and you can gift those to your friends or your community. You can also propagate nodding onion by seed, and pictured on the bottom left, you can see their seed. They're quite small. They require the cold stratification, so I started them in fall here. We have sweetgrass. This is a culturally important plant to some nations. It wasn't well known in the Satlium Nation. In BC, it's known to grow more in the alpine areas in northern BC and east of the Cascade Mountains. This plant would be more prevalent to Nehiyaw people, to Cree people on the plains. This is the first plant, the first cultural plant that I learned about growing up. It is often dried and braided and then used in our smudging ceremonies. Because of the compound coumarin, it has this sweet smelling scent and it kind of smells like vanilla. If you want to grow sweetgrass, they prefer full sun with moist soils and they spread by rhizomes. So this is a great plant to divide and they do spread easily. So picture down below in a 1-gallon pot is sweetgrass that I divided up from my sister's garden, and I will be able to give these away. One way to identify sweetgrass is the shiny leaves, and then also the red around the base of the grass, and you can see that near the soil in the pot there. To propagate divisions and seed, I had just taken some seed heads from the flowering part of the grass last year, sprinkled it on a pot, and they germinated. So to me, I feel this plant is very easy to grow. We have kwaku, big sagebrush. This is a culturally significant plant. It's an evergreen aromatic shrub. They are drought adapted. Once established, they prefer full sun with dry soils, and they're used in smudging ceremonies. They bloom in late summer and they have small yellow flowers. You can propagate these by seed, which is sown in the spring. So I'm guessing that they need the warm stratification. I've heard mixed things about starting sage from seed, and I think it'll just be a lot of trial and note taking, seeing what works in your area. We also have cuttings you can do. The cuttings are taken in late summer to winter. My call to action to you is to collect native seed from your yard and share it with your neighbors. There is a shortage of native seeds out there, so I think the more you can do in your backyard or in your community, the better. Support native plant nurseries and plants. You can ask your local garden centers to source more native species and also ask them to stop selling invasive species. We have English ivy, which is escaped cultivation and is finding its way into our forests out here. So I don't know why they're still selling it in nurseries. That's an invasive species that I'm still trying to see as a useful relation. And lastly is spend time on tmícwa, kalan tmícwa, listen to the land, and chunam hal tmícwa. Our land is our teacher. Kukstum Catlab, thank you all for your time. Here is a picture of shkimut, which is tiger lily, another important food source. The bulbs are edible. And here is my contact information if you have any questions. Nilti.